In 1998, NASA astronauts captured a photograph of something orbiting Earth that shouldn't exist. A dark, irregularly shaped object hovering in the silence of space, watching us from above. What they didn't tell you is that this object had been detected over a century earlier, sending signals that no one could explain. Some called it the Black Knight satellite, and if the theories are true, it's been watching humanity for 13,000 years. The story begins not in space, but in a laboratory in Colorado Springs in the winter of 1899. Nikola Tesla, the man who would change the world with his understanding of electricity, was conducting experiments with radio frequencies when something impossible happened. He detected a signal, a repeating pattern of pulses coming from somewhere beyond Earth. Tesla was certain these were not natural atmospheric phenomena or random cosmic noise. The signals were too organized, too deliberate, like someone or something was trying to communicate. He believed he had intercepted a transmission from Mars or another world, a thought that terrified and excited him in equal measure. Tesla documented these signals meticulously, but when he shared his discovery with the scientific community, he was ridiculed and dismissed as a dreamer. Yet Tesla insisted until his death that he had made contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence. Now here's where it gets disturbing. What if Tesla wasn't hearing signals from another planet, but from something much closer, something already here, orbiting silently above us? Fast forward to 1927, and a Norwegian engineer named Jørgen Haas begins detecting strange echoes during radio transmissions. These weren't ordinary echoes that bounce back immediately. These signals return with delays, sometimes 3 seconds, sometimes 8, sometimes 30 seconds later. It was as if something in space was receiving the transmission, holding it, then sending it back. Scientists called them long-delayed echoes, or LDEs, and to this day, no one has a definitive explanation for what causes them. In 1928, another researcher named Carl Sturmer worked with Haas to map these echo patterns. What they discovered was chilling. The delays formed a pattern, a sequence that suggested intelligence behind the signals. Some researchers later claimed these sequences, when decoded, pointed to star maps showing a position in space near the constellation Boats. Think about that for a moment. Radio signals bouncing back from space with intelligent patterns decades before humanity even launched our first satellite. What was up there listening and responding? The mystery deepened in 1954 when newspapers reported that the U.S. Air Force had detected 2 satellites orbiting Earth. This was 3 years before the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first confirmed man-made satellite. At that time, no nation on Earth had the technology to put anything into orbit. The Air Force quickly retracted the statement, calling it a misunderstanding. But researchers and journalists who investigated found that tracking stations had indeed picked up something in polar orbit. A polar orbit is significant because it passes over both poles, allowing complete coverage of the entire planet. It's the perfect orbit for surveillance, for watching everything happening below. Military officials dismissed it as asteroids or meteors, but asteroids don't maintain stable orbits around Earth. Then in the early 1960s, something even stranger occurred. During the height of the Cold War, both American and Soviet radar stations began tracking an object in polar orbit that neither side had launched. This was confirmed by multiple independent tracking systems, meaning it wasn't a glitch or a misidentification. The object was dark, not reflective like typical satellites, making it incredibly difficult to observe visually. Its orbit was unlike anything either superpower was using, and its size suggested something far larger than the simple satellites of that era. Astronomer and satellite tracker John Bagby was among those who observed it and reported its unusual tumbling motion and irregular shape. The Pentagon classified it as an unknown object and assigned it the codename Black Knight. Would you feel safe knowing something unidentified was circling above your head every day, watching from the darkness of space? The U.S. Department of Defense publicly stated it was likely a piece of space debris, but former insiders claimed that it was a cover story. They said the object was under active observation and that its trajectory was too stable, too deliberate to be random debris. In 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper was orbiting Earth during his Mercury 9 mission when he reported seeing a glowing green object approaching his capsule. Cooper was an experienced pilot, a man trained to remain calm under pressure, not someone prone to hysteria or misidentification. He reported the sighting to tracking stations, and radar confirmed an unidentified object in his vicinity. When Cooper returned to Earth, he was debriefed extensively, and according to him, he was told never to speak publicly about what he saw. NASA dismissed his account, claiming he had experienced hallucinations due to high levels of carbon dioxide in his capsule. But Cooper maintained until his death that he saw something real, something that tracked alongside him in the void. What was following him up there, in the silence where no one could hear him scream? Then came 1998, the year that changed everything. During the STS-88 mission, astronauts from the Space Shuttle Endeavour were conducting the first assembly mission for the International Space Station. As they worked in the cargo bay, they photographed a strange black object floating nearby. The object was asymmetrical dark, with a bizarre shape that didn't match any known satellite or piece of space equipment. NASA released the images to the public, and within days, they went viral across the early internet. People around the world saw what appeared to be undeniable proof of the Black Knight satellite. It didn't look natural. It looked constructed, designed, like a piece of technology from somewhere else. Conspiracy researchers exploded with theories. This was an alien probe sent to monitor humanity, a relic from an ancient advanced civilization, perhaps even a weapon waiting in orbit. Some claimed it was 13,000 years old, based on calculations of its orbit, S-degradation, and references to ancient astronaut theories. But NASA had a different story. They claimed the object in the photos was simply a thermal blanket that had accidentally come loose during a spacewalk. According to their official report, astronaut Jerry Ross lost the blanket while working outside the shuttle, and it drifted away, tumbling in orbit. The photos, they said, were taken as the blanket floated past before eventually burning up in Earth's atmosphere. Case closed, just a piece of trash, nothing to see here. But here's what doesn't add up. Thermal blankets are flexible fabric insulation, yet the object in the photos appears rigid and structured. Thermal blankets are typically white, silver, or gold in color to reflect heat, yet this object is jet black. Thermal blankets would tumble erratically in space, yet witnesses reported this object maintained a stable position. And perhaps most troubling, if this was just a lost blanket from 1998, what explains all the sightings and radar tracking going back to the 1950s and 1960s? What about the signals Tesla detected in 1899, decades before spaceflight even existed? Critics of NASA's explanation point out the similarities between this object and the one tracked as Black Knight in the 1960s. They argue that the thermal blanket story was a convenient cover, a way to explain away photos that accidentally revealed something the public wasn't supposed to see. Some researchers believe NASA released those 1998 photos intentionally as a limited hangout, an intelligence term meaning you reveal a small part of the truth to hide a much larger secret. By admitting the photos show something and then explaining it away as mundane space debris, they control the narrative and discredit anyone who digs deeper. Let me ask you something. If you worked for an agency that discovered evidence of alien technology orbiting Earth, would you tell the public, or would you find a way to make it disappear? The deeper you look into the Black Knight mystery, the more contradictions appear. In 1973, a researcher named Duncan Lunan analyzed those long-delayed echo patterns from the 1920s that Sturmer and Hals had recorded. Lunan claimed he had decoded the sequences, and they formed a star map pointing to Epsilon Botis, a star system in the constellation Botes. According to his interpretation, The message indicated that a probe had been sent from that system 13,000 years ago. 13,000 years ago, humanity was just emerging from the last ice age, building the first permanent settlements, nowhere near capable of space technology. Yet something supposedly arrived from another star system and positioned itself in orbit around our planet. Lunan's findings were published in scientific journals and caused a sensation, but he later retracted parts of his interpretation, saying he had made errors in his calculations. However, some believe Lunan was pressured to recant his findings by authorities who didn't want this information public. Whether his decode was accurate or not, the fact remains that these anomalous echo patterns existed and were never properly explained by mainstream science. Then there are the cultural references that seem too specific to be coincidence. Ancient civilizations around the world have stories of sky gods, watchers from above, celestial objects that observed humanity. The Dogon tribe of Mali spoke of beings from Sirius who came to Earth and shared knowledge of astronomy that they shouldn't have possessed. Ancient Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki, beings who came from the heavens and influenced early human development. Could these stories be cultural memories of encounters with whatever the Black Knight satellite represents? If an advanced probe had been watching Earth for thousands of years, it would have witnessed the rise and fall of every civilization we know. It would have seen the construction of the pyramids, the birth of writing, the first cities, every war, every achievement. And it would still be watching now, silently recording everything we do. In 2017, the scientific community was shaken when astronomers detected Oumuamua, the first confirmed interstellar object passing through our solar system. Oumuamua had a bizarre, elongated shape, tumbled in an unusual way, and accelerated as it left our solar system in a manner that could not be explained by gravity alone. Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb suggested it could be an alien probe, or even a light sail, a form of propulsion technology we've theorized but never built. If something like Oumuamua can enter our solar system from interstellar space, is it really so impossible that something arrived 13,000 years ago and stayed? The skeptics and debunkers have their explanations, and it's important to hear them out. They point out that space is full of debris, dead satellites, rocket stages, fragments from collisions, all tumbling in various orbits. The Black Knight, they argue, is a combination of misidentifications, each citing a different object conflated into one conspiracy theory. The 1998 NASA photos are explained by the thermal blanket. The 1960s radar contacts were likely Soviet satellites that weren't publicly acknowledged, and Tesla's signals were probably natural radio emissions from Jupiter or other celestial sources. The long-delayed echoes, according to mainstream science, could be caused by plasma in Earth's magnetosphere or reflections off the Moon under certain conditions. It requires you to accept that all these separate incidents, spanning from Tesla in 1899 to the space shuttle in 1998, are just coincidental misidentifications. And it requires you to ignore the fact that governments have a documented history of lying about aerial and space phenomena to avoid public panic. The U.S. government spent decades denying the existence of Area 51 until satellite photos made denial impossible. So when NASA says the Black Knight is just a thermal blanket, should we accept that at face value? Or should we ask what else they might not be telling us? If an unknown satellite has been orbiting Earth in a polar trajectory for decades or longer, it has complete surveillance coverage of the entire planet. It would see every military installation, every nuclear test, every secret facility. It would have witnessed the development of atomic weapons, the space race, the digital revolution. If it's transmitting data, where is that data going, and who or what is receiving it? Some researchers theorize the black knight isn't transmitting outward, but rather storing information, acting as a long-term observation and recording device. Perhaps it was placed here by an extraterrestrial civilization, conducting a long-term study of emerging intelligent species. A satellite that appears ancient to us might actually be from thousands of years in our future, creating a paradox that makes it seem impossibly old. A doomsday satellite placed in orbit by an unknown intelligence, programmed to activate if humanity reaches a certain threshold of technological development or aggression. Think about it. If you were an advanced civilization and you discovered a species that was violent and developing weapons of mass destruction, wouldn't you want to fail safe? The Black Knight's polar orbit would give it a perfect position to strike anywhere on Earth with minimal warning. What would you do if you discovered something watching you from above? Something you couldn't control or understand? Something that had been there longer than your entire civilization? In 2020, researchers using advanced telescopes and radar systems attempted to relocate the Black Knight to settle the question once and for all. They searched the orbital paths where it had been reported, looking for anything that matched the descriptions and characteristics. They found numerous pieces of space debris, old satellites, fragments from various missions, but nothing that definitively matched the Black Knight. Either it's no longer there, or it's using some form of stealth technology that makes it undetectable to our current instruments. Some UFO researchers have noted an interesting correlation. Sightings of unidentified objects in space and near Earth orbit increased dramatically after we began testing nuclear weapons. The first atomic bomb was detonated in 1945, and by the early 1950s, reports of unknown objects in our skies and in orbit skyrocketed. Astronauts and cosmonauts from various countries have reported strange sightings in space, though most are reluctant to speak publicly for fear of ridicule. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, stated before his death that extraterrestrial intelligence is real and that governments know more than they're telling. If trained astronauts are seeing things they can't explain, and if those sightings are being suppressed or dismissed, what does that tell you about the true nature of what's out there? The document was quickly declared a hoax by fact-checkers, removed from most platforms, and dismissed as fabricated. But the researcher who leaked it claimed it was genuine and that they were now being harassed and surveilled for releasing it. Every day, dozens of cameras and sensors are pointed at the ground, tracking our movements, recording our activities, listening to our communications. We've become so accustomed to being watched that we carry tracking devices in our pockets willingly. Maybe the real question isn't whether the Black Knight satellite exists, but why we're so uncomfortable with the idea that something else might be watching too. If an advanced civilization is monitoring us, maybe they're waiting to see if we'll destroy ourselves or evolve beyond our violent tendencies. Maybe they're studying how intelligence emerges and develops, using Earth as a living laboratory. If other intelligences exist, and if they're more advanced than us, they've likely been exploring space for millennia or longer. It's not a question of whether they could reach Earth, but whether they'd have any reason to be interested in us. And if something has been watching us for 13,000 years, through the rise and fall of countless civilizations, what does that say about our significance in the cosmic story? The Black Knight satellite remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the space age. Until then, it orbits somewhere in the darkness. Whether real or imagined, a reminder that space is not empty and we're not necessarily alone. Drop your thoughts in the comments because this mystery is far from solved.